Oh, you're an entrepreneur? Oh, you're a real estate investor. Oh, you're trying to learn from those who did it. Well, come into the lab then. Put your white coat on, gloves on, notepad, and let's build, y'all. Real estate experiment. What is happening, y'all? Today, I want to welcome Avery Carl into the lab. And I said this before, I'm super excited to have her in here because today we got another short-term rental expert. But your portfolio deserves an introduction, Avery. So I do want to level set for a second. Avery, you are not only an investor yourself in short-term rentals, but you also help others connect the dots and get them into the short-term rental space. You own over 32 properties. We got that right before the call offline. And you've actually sold more than $200 million worth of short-term rentals, Wall Street Journal's top 100 agents in 2020. I mean, I know the list goes on, but I'm so glad and humbled to be standing next to another short-term rental wizard. So Avery, first of all, welcome to the lab and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So first, I always like to talk about the person, right? Person behind the business, because I truly believe that the business is a reflection of who you are. So why don't you take a step back and tell us a little bit about who Avery is and when did you start, and then who are you now and what are you doing? What are you operating with? We've talked about your portfolio already, but let's talk about Avery for a second.
Sure. So I started my real estate investing career pretty similarly to every other real estate investor who just was not happy working for someone else, not happy sitting in an office. I'm definitely more of an entrepreneurial spirit. I do not make a good employee. I went through 3 jobs in 3 years right after grad school, and I just realized I'm not good at this. So when we moved to Nashville from New York City in 2013, and at the time I didn't have my license. And our agent was pushing us to buy in East Nashville, which was a super hip up and coming area at the time. I guess it still is, because it was appreciating really quickly and people were making a lot of money very quickly on their properties. But we, coming from Brooklyn, were sick of neighbors. So we went out in the country, said no neighbors. But we did have a little bit of money left. So we said, well, maybe we should buy one of those places. And then in the future, maybe one of our future children, we can sell it and send them to college. We didn't even know it was called real estate investing at the time. We had no idea what we were doing. We just did it. And so we bought one, happened to be a really, really good one. We still have it. It was a long-term rental. And after that first rent check, we thought, okay, this is cool. We want to scale this. We want to make a business out of this. So at that point, we actually started educating ourselves on the thing we just spent a lot of money on. And started reading all the books, listening to all the podcasts, and figuring out what our next move was. And we just had a limited amount of capital left, just enough for the down payment on one single family. So we were really trying to be strategic about what we did with that and find the thing that would make us the most money so that we could go buy more properties more quickly. So we landed on short-term rentals. But Nashville, where we lived at the time, is really, really volatile with the short-term rental rules. It changes all the time. Nashville just does not like Airbnbs. So we didn't want to do that. So we went 3 hours east to the Smoky Mountains, Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg area, because that's an area where it's just been the thing that people do when they go visit that area. They rent a cabin overnight, not a hotel. So we went, using that knowledge, we came to research and figure out that the regulations in that market are really, really favorable for short-term rental investors. And so we bought one. Again, didn't know anybody who was doing the same thing, had no help, no direction. But we bought what we thought would make an attractive rental, and we still have that one. That one was really successful. We scaled that into 5 over the next year and a half. Over the course of that time, I got my license because there were no agents in the market that we came across anyway who could answer my questions about occupancy rate, return on investment, how much is this going to make, any management questions, because we knew we wanted to manage it. We knew there had to be a way to manage it from Nashville without hiring a property manager who was going to charge 25% of our gross, which on a short-term rental is a lot.
Yeah.
So we figured out our systems, made that happen. And I started the short-term shop, and which is my real estate sales team. We're brokered by EXP. I have offices in 3 markets now. We sold right about 150 million in short-term rentals last year. And we've got offices in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, the Emerald Coast, so the Destin, Panama City Beach area in Florida, and Gulf Shores, Alabama. And we are opening up in Blue Ridge, Georgia here very soon. And we help other investors acquire short-term rentals. We help them analyze them. And we have a whole back-end training program where we help our clients learn to use the same systems and tools that we use to be able to manage remotely, so that they also don't have to pay a property manager, and they can just bootstrap and use all that cash flow to go buy another property or whatever they want to do with it. But most of our clients are looking to really get into real estate investing seriously. And just like us, it's a really good first step because you can make much more money more quickly. And we have 32 doors now. Not all of them are short-term rentals. We used all of our short-term rental income to roll into some more traditional long-terms. We're in the market for a 20-unit multi. So it's good to have a diverse portfolio, but short-term rentals are just a really nice little turbocharger to help you get there.
Oh, I'm so glad you used the word turbocharger, because I want to talk about that, and I'm experiencing it right now as we speak. I was talking offline how we recently acquired our 2 units here in Atlanta, and it's just literally supercharged. So I want to you said some really key things that I want to make sure don't slip through the cracks, Avery, because you said, hey, was looking for someone that would, the reason why you got your license, it sounds like you were trying to scratch your own itch. We needed somebody who had that intel, right, of the management, etc. Let's take a step back. Short-term rentals, what questions should you be asking when you're looking to make that purchase? Because you brought up a really good point, but what were some of those questions you were asking yourself when looking to make the acquisition?
The very, very most important question that you need to be asking when you're looking at any market is the regulations and the permitting process. So we needed to know, do we need a business license or a short-term rental license? Are those the same thing? Do we need to get both? What's the process? Is there a chance that they won't give it to us? Is there any limit on the number? You run into that a lot more with the metro markets than you do the vacation markets like I'm in. I have chosen the markets that I'm in because they have been areas where people have historically rented properties on an overnight basis rather than hotels. So all the places that I'm in have super safe regulations because it's been the norm. It's been something that the local economies are dependent on for decades, well before Airbnb. So yeah, the economies in those areas figured out how to monetize that decades ago. But that's the most important question that you need to be asking is, what are the regulations?
Okay, great. So what are the regulations that gets us in the door? Now, when we're looking at, okay, this area, let's say, is zoned, or I don't know if the word is zoned, but it's identified as an area that's short-term rental friendly. What is your next step when you're in that area and you're analyzing your next short-term rental, or maybe your first, if you're listening to our listeners who may be their first?
So you definitely want to, I'm going to preface this statement with keep your emotions out of it, but you do want to use your consumer instincts to choose a property. You want to buy something that you would want a vacation in. But what you want to do from there when you find an attractive one is there's a few ways that you can find rental history or rental data. So rental history, especially in vacation markets where there's a lot of old school property managers, not necessarily using Airbnb and VRBO, you want to take those numbers with a grain of salt and don't take them at face value. You want to take a few steps further and analyze how it's being managed, because a lot of times they're underperforming because they haven't been listed on the major booking platforms. AirDNA is another really good tool. It's not perfect, it's not gospel, but it does give you a really good picture of the overall trend of properties of the size that you're looking at, what they've done over the past few years in that market. Another way to look is one that I call the enemy method. And that's where you just get on the major booking platforms and look in the neighborhood where you're planning to buy and look at what your neighbors are doing. What is their price per night? How occupied are they? Now you can only see a little snapshot of, the next few months in front of you, but you can get a good idea of what cleaning fees are like. How can your listing be better than this person's, or can it be better than this person's? And you can get a really good idea of what your neighbors are doing that way.
What did you call the method, Avery?
The enemy method. So you go on the platforms and check out your enemies.
The enemy. That's interesting. I've never heard of that. So I love that you did mention the keyword. You almost corrected yourself, not the emotions and consumer. It is very interesting because in traditional investing, you say, hey, don't factor in the emotions, right? It's all about the numbers. But would you say that there is a tidbit of emotion that you should factor in because people are looking to stay at a place that they love, right? And maybe are willing to pay that extra dollar. Is that in alignment with your thinking, or is that?
Yes. So numbers are far and away the most important thing, but you do want to buy something that is in line with what the tourists that come to that area are going to want. So for example, in the mountains, it has to be a cabin. You can't buy a brick ranch home and expect it to rent as well as the cabins. The same thing in the beach, actually, with the brick ranch home. So, when people come to the beach, they like the funky colored beach houses, the condos with the amenities. You're just not going to do as well if you buy a 70s brick rancher. So you want to make sure that you're using a little bit of consumer sense, but the numbers are most important. Like I actually lost a client recently to another agent because I told her that it was a bad idea to buy a $1.3 million 3-bedroom that was not walking distance to the beach. So she went and used another agent because I offended her. But it just doesn't make sense. The numbers don't work.
Yeah. I'm glad that we're on the consumer part because this part is really interesting. So before we transition, I want to stop you there for a second. Is there anything that you've seen? Because now, again, 30 plus, you've sold to over 200 million. Is there anything that a listener right now should really take into account when you are thinking about the consumer and what they typically like? So is there anything that stands out to you that's an automatic, hey, when we put this into a property or when they see this, the bookings or the conversions are increased dramatically? Is there anything that pops out or jumps out at you?
That is also kind of market dependent, but in the Smokies, it's a hot tub. You have to have a hot tub. And indoor pools are kind of the new thing in the cabins out there. But in my beach markets, a private pool is a really awesome thing to have. A community pool is fine and will work. But if you can get a private pool, that's going to turbocharge your bookings as well. I said turbocharge twice. Now I'm self-conscious.
Oh, it's your branding. We'll make sure you brand that. If anybody's going to use that, get Avery Carl stamp on it. All right. Turbocharge. I love it. No, it's very powerful. So let's talk about fees. So you mentioned fees, and I'm very curious. So you talked about the enemy. Wow, you gotta copyright all of these. These are solid. The enemy method, right? So I'm scouring around and I'm looking at these fees, and this is something that we're testing as well ourselves. Let's talk about that for a second. If someone's maybe at their first short-term rental, or maybe they have a few, what are some sources where you're actually outsourcing your cleaning, and what is a good rate with respect to, again, the marketplace and maybe the bedroom ratio, and how should it be structured? I'm asking you like three. I'm turbocharging the question here. There's like 3 questions in one. But let's talk about those fees, those cleaning fees for a second.
Okay, cleaning fees. Mm-hmm. I charge so my cleaner charges per clean, and my properties are in areas where cleaning short-term rentals has been an industry for a long time, so it's probably different in a metro market. But my cleaner charges me a set amount per clean. 1 bedrooms are a certain amount, 2 bedrooms are a certain amount. If it has something, not a weird thing, but like a weird feature, like jacuzzi tubs where she's got to get down there and clean the jets, that's an extra fee. And we charge our guests between $20 and $50 more than what our cleaner charges us. We just because there's income. Everybody's like, oh, the cleaning fees are passed through. That can't be counted in your gross. It can't be counted in your gross, but it has to be counted in your gross because you're getting 1099 on your gross number from Airbnb and Vrbo. So you can't just not count that. But then B, it's not a true pass-through expense because there's income there. You don't have to charge the exact same fee to the guest that your cleaner is charging you. You can use that spread to, restock items and things like that. So there's definitely income in the cleaning fees.
Okay, so let's give a scenario. Let's say a booking is, $150 a night. Mm-hmm. Let's say what we've been seeing here is a typical cleaning. If it's 2 bedroom, you could be under like maybe 80, 90. If it's 3, you're already looking at 100 something, right? What would you say, and this is very interesting, would you say you tack that on to your nightly fee and you say, you know what, instead of charging 150 nightly, we put 180 nightly, and then what's my math? Charge them 70, right? Is that like, do you break it apart that way, or do you just say, you know what, nope, it's we'll keep it low? Because what I'm trying to say is that you don't want to maybe, and I don't know if you're using platforms like Airbnb, but you know, you look at it, it's almost like bait and switch. You like get, hey, $150 and then what, $100 for cleaning. Like, how should someone who's listening try to, you know, methodically manipulate or try to make it look so that it's not as kind of jarring to see like a cleaning fee that hits me and is almost worth like 3/4 of what my booking fee is? How do you address that?
Yeah. So again, the enemy method, you want to keep your cleaning fees around what your neighbors are and what's normal for the market. And we don't even analyze that. Our cleaner charges us $85 for a 2-bedroom. So we do $100, $115 cleaning fee, just depending on if we're not getting booked, then we'll, you know, drop the cleaning fee down. But we haven't run into an issue. I guess we haven't charged enough of a cleaning fee to deter anyone yet.
That's really good to know. So that's interesting. So we talked about just a level set. We talked about the zone, making sure the regulations are, you're in a good place. Then we talked about actually thinking about the consumer. Then we talked about the fees. Now, management. Let's talk about that. Is the cleaning it's a piece of the management, but do you completely leverage the cleaning as part of your management? Or can you just get away with a cleaner as you're operating these at scale? Or what does the managing look like on the back end for you?
We have a cleaner and a handy person, and you can kind of build out the rest of your systems from there. They're going to know, you know, an HVAC technician and a roofer. So our 2 core people are a cleaner and a handyman. And the cleaner, she is very, she treats the house like it's her own. She gets very offended if people are too messy, and she gets more offended than I do. I mean, they're going to be messy. Sometimes they're on vacation. So she lets us know if anything is out of place. And then we've got another cleaner. So we've got in the Smokies, they kind of run in their, stay in their own little district. So our other cleaner at our Gatlinburg place is the same way. He tells us if anything is out of place, we say either send somebody over to get it fixed, or, you know, if the sheets are looking a little bit ratty or something like that, they'll tell us and we'll just Amazon them whatever is needed. And they're just kind of like our eyes and ears, our mini property managers almost.
That's amazing. And so when you're looking at, you know, maybe 2 or 3, maybe it's in the same region, it's maybe it's the same, but as you start scaling, what does that look like? Is it that you're plotting these resources by the area, or are you leveraging virtual assistants on the back end to manage the entire thing? Like, what does that structure look like when we're scaling at 30 plus, 20 plus? What does your team look like?
We managed completely 100% on our own until we got to about 7. All of our long terms are on property managers. That's a different, that's a different
animal.
Yeah. But we do have, now that we have 7, we have a VA who helps us. I mean, he helps us with a lot of things, but he kind of takes care of just the back end communication of the FAQ stuff, like the where's this, where's that kind of thing. And we use channel managers. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. There's a few of them. One is called IGMS. One is called Your Porter. They do roughly the same thing, but they send out automated messages. So they didn't have those, or at least we didn't know about them when we first started. And they have really, really streamlined the process, because we just make sure that any possible question that the guest is going to ask is in that welcome email, so that they don't have to ask us again. And then of course they end up asking us again.
No, absolutely. We find a way to ask. It's like, I thought we put that everywhere, but that's fine. No, that's interesting. So I love that part. Systems. I'm very systems driven. And I know that, if you're listening to this show, I'm sure you're well aware of, of systematizing businesses. You talked about these channels, which is very, very key. As far as managing remotely, you have a virtual assistant, you have these channels. Is there anything else that, is it Wi-Fi keypad locks? Like, what are some best practice things for a new beginner who's listening, who's like, you know what, I want to get in this space? What should kind of be my hit list as I'm thinking about the investments I'm going to make up front to systematize this and work on the business and not in it?
Definitely Wi-Fi locks. There's a few good ones. We use the Schlage X Nest, and we use that on all of ours because we can control it, all of the locks from one app. You don't have to log in and out for different properties. And same thing with the Wi-Fi thermostat. We use a Honeywell. I think it's a T130. We started with Nest, but guests always mess up the Nest. The Honeywell it's the Honeywell version of the Nest. But it's a lot easier for them to use. There's a lot less mistakes they can make with it. So we have that too, especially at our places with fireplaces in mountains, because sometimes the guests will want to run the fireplaces, which do put out heat, and the air conditioner at the same time. So we'll just go on there and turn it up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really important. Yeah, we use like the alarm.com set. And control everything. So yeah, that's super key, because if you're going to do stuff out of state, even and from what we've heard, I think you're a perfect example of how to operate this long distance. I'm curious right now, tell the people, tell us the dream that you're living. Like, what does it look like now that you're able to be in Florida, in Destin, you said?
Yes, I'm in Destin at the moment.
What does that look like right now that you've gotten to this far? As 2021, we're in January right now, you've scaled this. How involved are you in, is it, what does the operations look like on a day-to-day from managing this kind of large portfolio?
It takes, I would say, maybe 20 minutes a day. It's not really that much, it's just answering a text message here and there. And then the more properties you add, the more text messages they are. But
is that from a cleaner manager? Like what's the communication with?
It's mostly guests. The cleaner is automated with a Google Calendar that is synced to the channel manager. So anytime somebody books, it sends her a message, or it puts it on her Google Calendar. So that part is not really an issue. It's really just, guests asking things like, oh, hey, we want to go on a hike today. Do you have any suggestions? Or our cleaner saying, looks like we need new towels, things like that.
Interesting. Awesome. So let's talk about the actual, okay, so how do we actually get these things? So you have a brokerage that you created called, is it Short-Term Stop?
The Short-Term Shop.
Short-Term Shop, that's correct.
Yeah.
And which I think is fascinating and good branding, by the way.
Thank you.
And so what does that look like if, so I'm actually licensed as well, as you guys know. So you're kind of like looking from the lens of an investor and now a broker. So okay, these are gems. How did you start finding the criteria? Is there something that you're filtering? Is there, how are you finding these short-term rentals? Like, that's a very niched way to do real estate. It's fascinating. So kudos to you, first of all. I love it. I love the concept, but tell us more about it. How does that even look like?
Well, I only operate in markets where the majority of the real estate is a second home or a short-term rental. So when I was working in Nashville, I had to do a lot more digging to make sure that everything was the right zoning and paying attention to the new regulations that we're passing. And okay, this zoning is changing and this is being downzoned. But in the markets that I'm in, most everything is a short-term rental. There's a few rules, like there's a very small geographic area, both Pigeon Forge and Gatlinburg, that is not zoned for short-term rentals to preserve affordable housing for the people who actually live there.
Yeah.
And then same thing in Destin. All the way to Panama City. They don't want you short-term renting north of 98 in most cases, but you wouldn't want to short-term rent north of 98 anyway, because the beach is south of 98 and you want to be walking. So that doesn't really play a factor. But you just kind of look at it the same way as if you would be going on vacation. Would I sell this to it? Would I be okay with one of my clients buying this? Is it going to rent? Because a rising tide raises all the ships. So if I make sure that my clients are super successful, they're coming back to me to buy another one.
Okay, so let's define success, because I think that's really interesting, right? And I'm like, and you guys know, because I've been starting to have a lot more guests like you come in and talk about short-term rentals, that people are not really aware of the kind of numbers we're looking at here and what kind of return. So can we talk about that for a second? How do you compare first of all, what is a good return on a short-term rental compared to a long-term rental? And then how do you make sure that in the trajectory or on the down, like how do you assess the risk or assess the investment so that you know that that investor is going to be at a good place? Not that you can guarantee anything, but how do you put in all these measures? So first, let's talk about the difference between a short-term rental return on investment versus a long-term rental.
They can do anywhere from 3 to as much as 10 times as a long-term rental, but it's a little bit hard to compare because a lot of times, so let's take a 5-bedroom vacation rental, for example, like in the Smoky Mountains. Nothing too crazy, just a cute, nice log cabin place to stay. That's probably going to gross right around $100,000, and it's probably going to cost right around $550, $600. So there's really no way to convert that to a long-term and make that cash flow at the current long-term rental prices in a place like the Smokies. So
can I stop you for a second? When you say 6,600, what was that?
Oh, it'll cost to buy the property probably like $550 or $600,000.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're saying yeah, well, that's interesting. And you can, again, ballpark around 100K a year.
Mm-hmm.
And now just to put things into perspective, if that was a long-term rental, you're renting it, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe we can even factor in what kind of mortgage payment would be. What are we really looking at?
If you really want to get down to it, if something happened where there were no, like a global pandemic where all of the short-term rentals went away, then there are more short-term rentals in Gatlinburg and Pigeon Forge than there are people who live there. So you probably wouldn't even get rented, to be honest, if all the short-term rentals went away. So that's something to think about when you're buying in a vacation market. You don't have to worry about regulations, but you're not going to be able to convert it to a long-term. But the good news is that in the past 2 recessions, which I don't know if I would call COVID a recession so much, just the way the economy has behaved, but it has been a weird worst case scenario. So in the 2008 recession, you can actually get this information on the Smoky Mountain National Park website and also on the Emerald Coast Tourism website for the Destin market. The tourism in 2008 did not drop parallel to the home prices. So what was happening is the people who were flying to Mexico to go to the beach were now just, driving down to Panama City. Same thing. Yeah, same thing with the Smokies. And then this time around with a global pandemic, people are dying to get out of their houses, but they don't want to go to big metro areas and they don't want to get on planes. But what they are doing is, so they can be in control of their environment, is doing the 5 to 8 hour drives to the places that are close to them. And so the regional drivable vacation rental markets have actually boomed because of COVID rather than taper off. So we've had 2 really bad worst case scenarios in the past 15 years, and it really has not affected it too much. So I think a global pandemic would have been the thing that I would think would have just killed it, but it didn't. So
bulletproof.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to bring home, and I'm trying to bring this point home, and I know you can help us with the difference between, right? Let's say you're not in a vacation, a rental area, and it's a very similar property, 600 to 600K ish, compared to that 100K, because I was blown away. Like, what would you say would be that ballpark of a long-term rental? I don't know if it's like maybe it can rent for $3,000 a month or whatever that price point would be, but let's just compare the two. Like, how much more do you actually make on a short-term rental? Would you say on average?
So you can, if you are getting anything less than a 20% cash on cash return, you are doing something very wrong. But a 40% cash on cash return is totally attainable. So, that same 5-bedroom, if it's not a worst case scenario and nobody's getting long-term rent, it'd probably go for like $2,500, maybe $3,000 a month.
Yeah.
Possibly. Probably closer to $2,500.
Which really puts things into perspective. You're looking like a 3x, right? At least.
Mm-hmm.
That's fascinating. So certainly if that didn't get your attention, it certainly got mine. And but it's interesting. So do you help any investors who are kind of interested in, hey, listen, Avery, this sounds all good to me, but I always want to have an exit strategy, right? So maybe I'm not going all the way to the Smoky Mountains, or maybe I'm going back to maybe like closer to Metro, and I want to have the ability to do hybrids. Have you had investors who maybe feel that way, and you structure it a little bit different on how you analyze deals?
Generally, the exit strategy. So generally what people are doing with these is they're not planning on necessarily keeping them forever. They're planning on using them as a cash cow to buy other properties. So, but that's generally like a 5 to maybe 10-year hold. So there's not really any specific different structure. I do have some clients who do medium-term rentals in Nashville. They buy short-term rental zoned properties so that they could, if they want to do Airbnb, but they do monthly corporate furnished rentals and do really well. But it's an entirely different thing. Like it's, they have to build out your own website and market it completely differently. And, but they do really well with that. I think they have something like 45 units in Nashville.
Oh wow. Okay. Excellent. So if I come into your office, Avery, and I'm an agent. So if I'm an agent out there that's listening to this, I'm like, okay, this is really cool. I kind of want to be like Avery. Kinda. It's gonna be hard, y'all, but I kind of want to be like Avery. This sounds really fascinating. What would be some, okay, you talked about marketing, you talked about, analyzing the deal. What are some of the basics that you're literally letting that new agent who you're tucking under your wing, what are you letting them know that they should kind of establish as pillars?
They definitely need to study the AirDNA data as much as possible. Again, AirDNA is not perfect, but it does give you a good baseline idea of what things should be doing. Definitely, we went over regulations, and you just want to listen to, even if it's not short-term rental specific, you really do need to familiarize yourself with the lingo and just the terms, basically the vocabulary words that investors use. Because if you don't know what cash on cash return means and they start asking about that, then you're not going to know what to say. So just definitely consume as much media as possible, whether that's books or podcasts. Just make sure that you are really, really well versed in investment real estate.
That's amazing. So what is next for the operation that you're running for you? I know you talked about some people are using it as a cash cow. I know you talked about the multifamily, just supercharge, super boost, right? We talked about all that. What do you see is your vision as to what comes next for you? Because you got your hands in so many things. And it's fascinating because they all kind of intertwine. You have the ability to be an investor. You have the ability to analyze deals as a realtor. I'm sure you're paying yourself as well as you're buying these, which is amazing. So what's next for you?
I am in the market for a 10 to 20 unit multi. That's next.
10 to 20 unit multi. And are you raising capital, or you're just going to go all in by yourself, or what's the deal with that? Are you going to leverage any properties? Are you liquidating any assets? Just kind of give people the idea of like, wow, if I build my portfolio, here are the kind of the options that I can have. What are your thoughts?
This on the first round, all by myself. I've got the down payment. I've got the financing. We're ready to go. We're just waiting on the deal. So if anybody has a deal, find me. Waiting on the deal. And then after that, because my husband and I aren't really people that want to get involved with something if we haven't done it ourselves first. So I don't feel like I bring any value to somebody in a multifamily deal until I have done one and own one on my own. So I kind of at least know what I'm doing a little bit. So by ourselves the first round, and then after that, who knows? But definitely staying in the multifamily space. And we'll probably I'm probably going to buy a place in Gulf Shores this year as a short term. So there will probably be a few more short terms in there, but the multifamily thing is the focus at the moment.
It's funny, actually. I'm going to be on a panel in the next 20 minutes in Clubhouse. I don't know if you're on there, but you should get connected on that. And we're going to talk about multifamily investing in Airbnb. I know this is a thing that we've been talking a lot with, depending on where your marketplace is, as far as, there's rental arbitrage. There's a lot of different things that some owners are looking to get into to kind of address the deficit or the lack of or the lower occupancy rate, or I should say the higher occupancy rates, or I'm saying the wrong thing, vacancy rates. That's what I meant to say. Thank you. The higher vacancy rates. So what are your thoughts with kind of taking this residential model and bringing it at a higher scale? Is that something that you're even thinking of? Is that something that you've heard of in your industry now that since you got your feet deep in it? What is that? What are your thoughts on that?
I have known a few people who will have renovated like roadside motels and turned them into like little apartment Airbnbs, kind of like a hotel Airbnb. Mm-hmm. What makes me nervous about that at the moment, which I think it's just a blip on the radar and it's going to go away. There are a lot of hotel foreclosures going on right now because of COVID. And I think, maybe for a little while, people are still going to be a little like, I don't really want to stand next to you in this hotel, Right. So I think that the single family rentals are a really solid thing right now. Before COVID, I was kind of thinking, it would be cool. There's this kind of rundown motel. It would be cool to fix that up and just rent the whole thing on Airbnb. It's definitely a cool concept.
Very interesting. Yeah, I'm wondering where that's going to go. I mean, I know that's a big pitch now, especially in commercial real estate. And peer space. I was actually are you familiar with peer space?
I'm not familiar with peer space.
A lot of us were blown away yesterday. There was a co-founder of Peer Space, which is basically a place where any commercial real estate space that is sitting idle, even like restaurants, you can repurpose that space for like photographers who are looking to shoot things, movies, videos, and it's a really good place where you can actually utilize your property throughout. It's not at night, so it's only during the day. So so you can actually use it as a hybrid. So if there's any Airbnb investors out there, you can actually increase your revenue by a lot by having your property up on Peer Space, especially if it's very unique and modern. So any homes with pools, like you see these music videos or like these influencers or production companies who may be actually looking for that kind of space. And right now with COVID, it's actually a lot more prevalent for people to be looking for space where, gyms are closed, things like that are closed, right? So that's a little plug for you. I had to give back some value. And if you're listening, definitely tap into it. I know that's something that's not as common, but it was co-founded by someone here in New York. And then they, it's out there for you guys. Listen, Avery, this was great. I'm going to have a question from the audience because I'm going to get crushed if I don't ask this. From at this point, do you know any short-term rental financing that's out there? Or I know it's kind of this is a very niche model, so I'm not sure that lenders look at properties as long-term properties, but when you're looking at an asset that's making you 3 times the amount, have you found a way, or is there someone that you know of out there that they're actually understanding this business model and are actually looking to maybe finance a potential short-term rental in a very different way than a traditional?
The creative way to do it, and kind of the most popular among short-term rental investors, is the 10% down vacation home loan. So there's a few stipulations to that. One, it has to be 65 miles away from your primary. 2, you can't put a contract like a lease or a property management contract on there, anything that takes the control of the property away from you, because you also have to have the ability to stay in the property for a certain amount of time per year. And different banks have different overlays about what that needs to be. The lowest one I've seen is like 2 weeks. And I've also never heard of anyone checking on it. Maybe they will. This isn't disclaimer.
We're winking if you're, first of all, talk to your lawyer. And if you're driving, watching this, we winked while we were on camera.
This is not legal advice, not lending advice, but any conventional lender can do a 10% down vacation home. So talk to your lender and talk to local lenders in the market that you are interested in investing in, because they're usually more familiar, especially if it's a big short-term rental market like the Smokies or Destin. They're not going to get as tripped up as if they're like a random officer at Quicken Loans or something like that.
Wow. Shout out to Quicken Loans. That's awesome. Well, Avery, I can't even thank you enough for dropping so much value to our audience. This was super fun. I totally enjoyed it. Where can the people find out more about Avery Carl and the wonderful operation that you're running at Short Term
Shop.
Shop? Why do I was? That's on me, guys. Short Term Shop. I keep on saying stop. Maybe we can co-brand those. I don't know, but no, obviously. Where can we find out more?
On my website at theshorttermshop.com, or follow me on Instagram at theshorttermshop. On my website, there's phone numbers. You can call me, text me, email me. There's a bunch of ways to get a hold of me on there.
Amazing. We will make sure we include that in the show notes. If you're driving, hold on to the steering wheel. We'll have that in the show notes and you guys won't miss a thing. Thank you so much, Avery, for stepping into the lab and giving us all these gems. And just like that, we are out.